Hi, I'm Nikki, and I'm 17. Do you like to comb your hair, braid it, do a ponytail, maybe a haircut or color? Lucky you, because I can't do any of it. I don't have any hair at all. How did this happen? No, I didn't face cancer, and I wasn't shaved by aliens, and I never served in the army. It was a terrible accident at school. Let's start from the beginning. I was never too popular. You know, there's always that invisible kid in the school that no one would invite to a party, ever. Well, here I am, the lucky one. There are pros and cons in being unseen. You know, like, I can say, hello, to someone, and they would just look through me in response. I am always ignored, all by myself, surrounded by books instead of real people. I even used to like it until the day that changed my whole life. By the end of first semester, I signed up for an advanced course in chemistry. I was always interested in it. I wanted to be a doctor. I still want to, and I will be. So once we had a practical lesson, a whole 45 minutes alone with reagents, flasks, a huge distiller, and 2 noisy classmates. Mr. Anderson, our teacher, was so tired of listening to their stupid jokes and trying to maintain classroom discipline that by the end, he just gave up and sat down with his eyes closed. Suddenly, Mr. Anderson got called to the director's office. What does your class look like when the teacher is gone? My class is a complete mayhem. The chief bully, Dick Kennedy, immediately made a terrible fuss. He grabbed his test tube, filled with distilled water, and spilled it on the guy next to him. That one made a terrible face and began to hiss loudly. Well, of course, we had a whole lesson in acids, and Mr. Anderson showed us how to mix liquids so that caustic drops wouldn't scald our hands. For demonstration, he dipped a piece of apple into a bottle of hydrochloric acid and explained what happened in our stomach due to this very dissolution. Several test tubes were lined up on the teacher's desk. I knew that we all had water or weak alkali solutions in our test tubes. But I didn't like that the guys started to spray them and pretend to get burnt. They hissed and screamed louder and louder, and everything around us was wet. Our bags, our clothes, and the notebooks on our desks. I asked them to stop, but they did not pay any attention, and the teacher didn't come. And it did. Actually, at first, I felt that Dick, who was sitting behind me, throw something at his friend, but unfortunately, it hit me. Or maybe, fortunately, because if I hadn't been in its way, the acid would hit Francis right in his face. My hair got wet and my skin started to burn. Dick screamed in fear as he saw shreds of my hair fall on the floor. It was getting more and more painful, but I knew I shouldn't touch my head. Yes, I was incredibly scared, but the acid that burnt my skin almost did not hurt me. Almost. The teacher came in just as I started to scream. He looked at me and got scared too. Everyone was terrified. The back of my head was wet with blood. The school nurse came running. They calmed me down, washed my skin with a lot of water, then with alkali solution. There was almost no hair left. Some patches on my temple and forehead had to be removed because I looked like an elderly stand-up comedian. For the first week, I just couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I had never considered myself a beauty, but now that my once blonde hair was gone for good, every glance in the mirror hurt. I simply couldn't recognize that bald monster covered with the scaled burns. Mom and Dad even removed or covered all the mirrors in the house, especially for me, but it's impossible to hide from myself and other people forever. Dick tried to apologize several times, but I didn't feel strong enough to accept his apology. How could I forgive him? My mom and I went to the wig store, when my wounds healed enough. We chose several wigs made of natural hair, an artificial one, and one with pink pigtails. One more simple, and one with bangs. I even had a little fun trying them on one by one. Ladies in the store kept telling me how good I looked, how pretty I was, but that couldn't bring my hair back. That day, I realized that I'm going to wear a wig for the rest of my life. Of course, if I don't want to embarrass others with my bald head. Have you ever wanted to hide in your room and never leave it? That was my only wish. But you can't hide out forever. I wasn't thrilled with the idea to put on my head a wig every morning. It looked so unnatural. As time went on, I began to get used to it, but there was a new problem. As if there weren't enough already. Wearing this mop of hair, I felt sweaty and uncomfortable. It didn't hold well and bounced during sports, but I was too afraid to take it off. Soon, Dick stopped portraying remorse and began to bully everyone again. I tried my best to ignore him, but Dick acted like a total dick. I annoyed him, as if he blamed me for what had happened. How dare he behave like that? I felt awful, being dragged in these endless quarrels and shouting back. At least I became more self-confident after what happened. I felt like I had nothing to lose. Once he said that I could stop deceiving myself and others. He grabbed my wig and then just pulled it off in front of the whole class. I froze without my last layer of protection. Everyone stared at me so openly and viciously that my knees were trembling. And then Doris got up from her seat, although we never even spoke to each other. She just got up and came over to me, putting herself between me and Dick. She did so without a word, and without a single word, she held out her hand. She took the wig out of Dick's hand and slapped his face with it. Then the other girls stood up. They shielded me, looking down at Dick and shaking hands with me. I felt for the first time that I was not alone. It was amazing. Dick could not stand the silent pressure and left. He just stormed out of the class, slamming the door. I wanted to put my wig on. It was awkward to stand surrounded by my pretty classmates with my bald head. But Doris stopped me. "There's no need for such a beauty to wear someone else's hair," she said, and patted my shoulder. "This is your new style." I knew that I was different from other girls, but I still couldn't see any positives in it. Neither could I go on living as before. The more I tried to hide my baldness, the more awkward everyone felt, including me. That day, I went to Doris's house after school. She and her friends did some magic on me. They experimented with clothes and makeup. I didn't understand much of that fashion slang. Ha ha. What, a monster looked at me from the mirror? Well, my bald head was nothing comparing to what the girls painted on my face. No way! I washed it all off. But at home, I tried to put on my own makeup. I could no longer be mistaken for a mousy little thing. Bald with a pair of new earrings and bright makeup, I was a goddamn style icon. People paid me attention, yes, but I actually liked it. I owned that attention. I controlled it now. Less than a month later, Dick asked me to go to the prom with him. Yeah, forget it. I have already promised to go to the prom with the one who shaves his head. Let's see what happens. I'm going to be a doctor, maybe work in a burn center. And meantime, I post my brand new looks on Instagram. I think this is important, not only for me, but for everyone who has a difficulty accepting his or her unconventional appearance. If you enjoyed my story, please like it, and you will find many other cool ones on our channel. Don't forget to subscribe and push the bell to stay tuned. Have a good one!
I opened my mailbox and froze in disbelief. There was a strange unmarked envelope. Was it a joke? I quickly opened it and froze. The letters were not written by hand, but cut out of newspapers. As soon as I read the first sentence, everything swam before my eyes. My boyfriend was kidnapped and was being held for ransom. I'd been dating Max since high school, and I loved him very much. He was sweet, charismatic, but lately, I'd only gotten annoyed at the sight of Max. The fact was that he was a TikTok blogger and constantly shot pranks. He could change into the clown from It, which I was afraid, then pour water on me, then throw the cake on my head. Even though I hated pranks, I put up with all these jokes for the sake of love. But one day, Max crossed the border. In the restaurant where we celebrated our anniversary, I lifted up a dome, but instead of food, there were cockroaches. I started screaming and slapped Max, who was shooting me on the phone, in the face. This was too much. I yelled at him and snapped. One more prank and we're breaking up. Since then, Max had been so calm. He even rarely took out his phone, although he had never looked up from TikTok before. Max was as romantic as he had been in high school again. He listened to me, complimented me, everything seemed perfect. But one day, Max just disappeared. He didn't come home from work and his phone was unavailable. Strange. I was starting to worry, so I decided to call his best friend Adam. They met in college and they always hung out together ever since. There was Max's neighbor then in their company, but they had a big quarrel with him. Adam picked up the phone almost immediately and said that he and Max hadn't spoken in days. I couldn't hide my anxiety. Where was he? I called Max's colleagues, but it turned out that he had not been at work for several days. Panic gripped me. What if he was in an accident? I had terrible thoughts, and I couldn't stand it. I had to call the police, but after listening to me, they yawned. You can file a wanted list 3 days after the disappearance. They hung up. I was restless. What if Max was really in danger? He would have found a way to tell me if all was well. I called Adam again and stammered out a description of the situation. He tried to cheer me up and said he'd come see me soon. I barely waited for him, and when he arrived, I got in his car and we immediately went to the hospitals. I needed to find out if Max was here, but neither the first nor the fifth hospital had him. I didn't know whether to be happy or cry. Even though Adam tried to calm me down, I couldn't stop being nervous. Max, where are you? And here was the last hospital with a sinking heart. I went in and asked the receptionist if there was a guy in his 20s with dark hair, tall. The administrator thought about it and frowned, saying that yes, there was such a guy. My heart skipped a beat. Was this Max? I walked stiffly to the room where the nurse took me. My heart was pounding in my chest. Then the nurse pulled back the curtain and I froze. There was a guy lying on the bed, mostly in a cast, but it wasn't Max. I breathed a sigh of relief. He wasn't in the hospital. We needed to keep looking. It was late in the evening when Adam and I drove up to my house. Adam, seeing my condition, volunteered to accompany me, and then I noticed that an envelope was sticking out of the mailbox. I quickly took it out. Weird. No recognizable markings. And after reading it, I didn't know what to think. Max was kidnapped and they demanded a lot of money for him, which I never had in my life. My vision blurred. My legs buckled. At the last moment, Adam caught me. He carried me into the living room, brought me some water, and covered me with a blanket. I felt a little better, but my mind was still on the letter. Who were the kidnappers? Why did they need Max? What if they came back here? I shivered, and Adam quietly asked if he should stay with me. Yes, please. I was terrified even at the thought of being left alone in the house. Adam settled down in the living room, but I couldn't sleep. It seemed that the kidnappers would break in through the window. In the middle of the night, I went to Adam, and he understood everything without words. As a result, I fell asleep on the couch, and he fell asleep on the floor next to me. I was so grateful that he didn't leave me in this situation. When I woke up, Adam was already up and making breakfast. He made a fine omelet, though I had no appetite. I didn't know what to do, and I was desperate. But Adam said we couldn't wait. We needed to call the number listed in the letter about the kidnapping and find out the details. I nodded, and Adam pulled out his phone. There were long beeps, and at that moment, I even forgot how to breathe. And then, in an afterlife voice, came from the phone. Bring $100,000 to the city park. And they hung up. We tried to redial, but no one answered. Heck, I sank down on the couch and covered my face with my hands. How could I get this amount? And Adam couldn't get. He was still in college. Then Adam patted me on the shoulder, smiling ruefully. We must not despair. 5 minutes later, we were calling all our friends and acquaintances to borrow money, and in the evening, we already had a good amount, but still not enough for the ransom. Tears welled up in my eyes from exhaustion and despair. Where could I get the money? And then Adam exhaled. I know where, but what? I didn't care anymore. I would have done anything for Max. How scared he was right now. We needed to get him out. Then Adam admitted that the work was illegal. This was a casino. He was surprised when I agreed without hesitation. And in the evening, we were at the casino. Adam was supposed to cheat, and I was supposed to help by distracting the other guests. To do this, I had to wear a revealing red dress. At first, I felt terribly awkward. I caught devouring glances at myself and was embarrassed. But at some point, Adam took my hand and squeezed it tightly. I realized that I could not be afraid of anything with him, and I began to behave much more boldly. Gradually, our winnings increased, and I was already happy. We scored the missing amount. There was not much left. And in the last game, I suddenly noticed that a fake card fell out of Adam's sleeve. God. It had been noticed. I quickly bent down to pick it up when suddenly one of the men shouted, "Fraud!" Fear gripped me as the man's thick fingers wrapped around my wrist and pulled me toward him. No, this is a misunderstanding. No one listened to me. This was the end. But suddenly Adam pushed the man away and gave him a good punch. Before I knew it, we were running out of the casino. It was the first time I had run so fast without noticing anything around me, because I could clearly hear we were being chased. At one point, Adam pulled me by the trash cans, and we crouched down. My heart was pounding. My vision blurred. But damn, that was awesome. And most importantly, we now had the missing amount. In the morning, we put all the money in a bag and went to the park. But there were no kidnappers there. I was beginning to worry when my phone rang. A strange number. Frowning, I picked up the phone, and then a voice from the dead ordered us to wait. I frowned. The voice sounded vaguely familiar. Something similar already happened when Max pranked me on the phone. It was kind of weird, but before I knew it, a black car came around the corner and stopped right in front of us. 2 big men ran out of there and seeing me with a bag. One of them quickly threw me on his shoulder. It happened so fast that I didn't even have time to make a sound, and then Adam started after me. He hit the big guy who grabbed me. He staggered and let go of me, but the other one was coming at him from behind. Not again. Adam, behind you. At the last moment, he dodged and struck at the second giant. I thought the big boys were going to attack us again. They stood with their fists clenched, and I was already mentally saying goodbye to life. But then they just turned around, got in the car, and drove away. I looked around, confused. They took the bag. I sucked and buried my nose in Adam's chest. Was it all in vain? Poor Max. I was so worried about him. Adam stroked my hair and sighed. It's going to be okay. I was waiting all day for a message from the kidnappers, but it wasn't until the next morning that I received an entitled email. My mouth was dry with excitement. It was definitely them. I quickly went through the lines. They demanded another ransom. Oh my god! I scrolled down, and my stomach clenched with fear. There was bound, terrified Max on the photo. The sight of him literally tore my heart apart. I immediately dialed Adam and asked him to come over. I couldn't do this alone. While waiting for Adam, I looked at the photo for a long time because I missed Max so much. Then my eyes came across the wallpaper in the photo. I was thinking and suddenly, oh my god. This was the room on campus that Max used to live in. Although I had only been there once, I remember very well how it looked. Wait, did this former neighbor kidnap Max? Oh my god, no wonder they had been in conflict before. Max kept saying that the kid didn't like him. I immediately grabbed the phone and dialed the police. He would pay for everything. Just then, Adam drove up. I walked resolutely to his car. We need to get back to the campus. On the way, I briefly explained the situation to Adam, and he was in shock. After all, Max's neighbor, in his opinion, was always so quiet, calm. Still water runs deep. We arrived at the campus at the same time as the police and quickly found the right room. In an instant, the cops broke down the door and burst in. My heart was pounding in my chest. I would finally see my Max. But as soon as I ran inside, I saw Max. He was perfectly healthy. He looked at the cops in surprise. And when his eyes met mine, he suddenly smiled and said, "Did I play a cold trick on you?" I took a step back in shock. It turned out that there was no kidnapping. It was a fucking prank. I closed my eyes and clenched my fists. "Stop it! I've had enough!" I shouted loudly that Max was a moron who didn't have a brain. And it was all over between us. Max wanted to run after me, but the cops stopped him and arrested him. I soon learned that he had been assigned to community service. And Adam and I got even closer. A month later, he even asked me out. And of course, I agreed. Adam, unlike Max, really cared about me. I realized that if a person loves, they will listen to you and your feelings. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you. I struggled, but their grip was too tight. These psychos dragged me into a basement and put me on a chair and then tied me to it. I looked around startled. What were they going to do? Then Jack said harshly that it was time to sacrifice me. What? No, don't, please. But it was too late. Jack drew his knife and swapped it. This was the end. I never imagined that this could happen to me. A couple of days ago, there were no signs of trouble, but when I got home from work too late, Jared, my boyfriend, was beside himself with anger. He shouted that I spent more time working than being with him, and I could get infected from these homeless people. You never know where they've been. I wasn't going to listen to this, and I said coldly that I loved my job and would never give it up. After all, helping the homeless in the volunteer center was my life. But Jared exhaled noisily. "Did date your work?" It was too much. I said over my shoulder, "It's better than you." As I entered the bedroom, I heard the front door slam. Jared left, and I suddenly noticed rose petals on the bed. Stop. The candles were out, and the dinner was cold. Jared wanted to have a romantic night with me. What a fool I was. I suddenly felt so ashamed. He meant well. I fiddled with the phone, not daring to dial Jared, and suddenly I got a message from the boss. He asked me to come on the shift tomorrow on my day off. Exactly. At work, I always forgot about all the problems and felt happier. I immediately wrote back that I would come early. I would make up with Jared later. But after the first shift, there was a second and then a third. I couldn't make up my mind to call Jared, and I didn't have time. Helping the homeless, as usual, took up all my time. I was working for the 7th day in a row when I had to be replaced by another volunteer for the night. But when the clock struck 9, no one appeared. And suddenly my phone vibrated. I breathed a sigh of relief. It was the volunteer. Maybe he was late. But when I picked up the phone, I heard his worried voice. He got a flat tire and he wouldn't be able to come. Heck. I immediately wrote to the group chat center to find a replacement for me. Although I loved my job, I didn't want to stay on the night shift after 7 working days. I was tired and I was constantly getting sleepy, but as luck would have it, everyone in the chat was silent. I sighed. Apparently, I would have to stay. I couldn't leave the center unattended. The homeless people were even happy with the news. I worked for a long time, and I managed to make friends with most of them. We told stories, joked, and even did our own stand-up. It turned out that many homeless people had incredible humor. But still, something was bothering me. Gradually, as the night wore on, I began to notice oddities. A few homeless people returned from the street even more untidy than usual, and during the stand-up, someone started joking about cannibals. I thought it was not funny, but creepy. But all the homeless people were laughing. And then, when I told him to wrap it up, Jack, one of the old-timers, suggested we watch a movie. I smiled. Of course, comedy, maybe, or melodrama. But Jack suddenly broke into a terrible toothless smile. A chill ran down my spine, and he said he wanted to see a movie about sacrifice. I frowned, unease growing inside me, but he used to hate horror movies. He didn't say anything, just remained silent, smiling horribly. I was about to ask him what he wanted to see when Jack's voice dropped to a whisper. He began to offer to see at least something about dismemberment. A shiver ran down my spine. No way. I snapped that the entertainment was over for the day and tried to calm down. Although the evening was somehow strange, I decided that I was just winding myself up because of fatigue. Trying to force a smile, I said it was dinner time and started handing out chicken soup to everyone. Homeless people always loved it, and I hoped it would cheer them up. But instead, they ate it with a kind of displeased face. And when I asked what was wrong, Jack said chicken soup is delicious, but the human meat will be better. And wait, at that moment, I was really scared. Human meat? What? I barely managed to maintain my apparent calm. Homeless people never behaved like this before. I suddenly remembered the articles I'd read in college. It was about people without a home. They said that over time, these people began to go crazy and might even turn to cannibalism. I froze in horror. So Jack and the others? Were they crazy? Trying to force a smile, I quickly ran out into the hallway and dialed the supervisor. Beep sounded. Come on, answer me. But no one answered. Then I started calling my colleagues, hoping that at least someone would answer me. But everyone seemed to have disappeared. I felt terribly lonely. I was scared. At that moment, someone touched my shoulder. I flinched and spun around. Jack! He smiled wryly and said that they wanted to play hide and seek. I frowned. A child's game? Jack nodded. But then his smile turned vicious. He added, but unusual hide and seek. It's about survival. Whoever is found is eaten. I screamed, and Jack began to move slowly toward me. Anything but that. Terrified, I ran to the door and yanked on the handle. It was locked. God, what should I do? I pressed myself against the door. Jack was coming at me, and at that moment, the lights in the building went out. I looked around, confused, trying to get my bearings in the dark, and then an eerie otherworldly voice said, "The game is on." I shivered, my heart pounding. No, anything but that. At that moment, someone suddenly grabbed my arm. I screamed and yanked it. No, I won't let you eat me. My grip loosened, and I managed to writhe myself free and immediately took off for the hills. I needed to escape. The voices were fading, and I thought I'd escaped, but then I tripped over something and fell flat to the ground. Pain shot through my leg, and tears welled up in my eyes. Heck, I tried to stand up, but I almost whimpered in pain. Apparently, I sprained my leg. Tears welled up in my eyes. Despair gripped me. I can't give up. I needed to hide. I leaned on my hands and crawled forward toward the closet. With the last of my strength, I reached for the closet, grabbed the handle, and stretched. Almost done. But then it reeled, and the plates on top of it shattered with a clatter. I think I forgot how to breathe. My vision blurred. It was over. The homeless people began to crowd around me, grinning horribly with toothless smiles, and a chill ran through my body. Please don't touch me. We're friends. But they didn't seem to hear. They grabbed me by the shoulders and dragged me into the basement. No matter how much I resisted, it was useless. When they put me in a chair, Jack laughed angrily and suddenly took out something. The blade glinted in the dark. The knife. I was numb with horror and even speechless. Another homeless man took out an old book and said that I should be sacrificed to the god of home comfort. Only then would they have their own housing and they would finally stop being homeless. I couldn't believe what was happening. Could the homeless people I devoted my whole life to do this to me? I sobbed convulsively and shrank back into my chair as they reached for me. This was the end. And then I heard firecrackers, and I was startled. The homeless retreated and smiled happily. What was happening? Surprise! A familiar voice shouted. I turned around. My boyfriend, Jared, came into the basement, followed by the head of the center and the volunteers. They all laughed merrily while I was puzzled. What are you doing here? What's going on? Then Jared came up to me and took me in his arms. Happy Halloween, my love, he said, still smiling. Wait, I looked back at the laughing homeless people and it slowly dawned on me. So this was all a hoax? It turned out that I worked so hard that I forgot about Halloween, and the homeless wanted to give me a real atmospheric holiday. They persuaded the boss, and Jack and Jared, my boyfriend, were in charge of everything. Jared wanted to make up. Make up? A great way. He scared me half to death. I was furious, and my heart was still pounding. But Then Jared came up to me and took my hands. He looked me in the eyes and said that during the preparation for the holiday, he understood why I valued my work so much. Even the homeless could become close friends for us. The most important thing is the attitude of people, not their social status. He spoke so sincerely that I immediately forgot about the anger and resentment and threw my arms around Jared. I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have reacted so harshly. I'll spend more time with you from now on. Because I love you. He smiled. I love you too, Clara. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Emily, and I am 15 years old. Have you ever been in a situation when your worst nightmares and fears became real? Did you feel like you were going crazy, but you couldn't tell anyone? This is exactly the situation I found myself in. You know, better watch the video to the end, and you will learn how at night the worms came out of me. When I was a child, I often had the same nightmare. In it, I lay motionless in bed and watched hundreds of worms ate me from the inside out. The reason for this nightmare was due to an unsuccessful prank. One day, when I came back from gym, I opened my locker and found a bunch of worms in it. Before I knew what was happening, I was pushed into it and locked in. I screamed in fear and begged to be released, but to no avail. Worms were everywhere and literally crawling all over my body, and I didn't notice how I lost consciousness. I woke up at home. The teacher called my mother and told her what had happened. My mother took me home, and my classmates were punished and expelled from school. Justice was served. But the phobia remained with me forever. Now I'm in high school. I forgot about that joke a long time ago. All my childhood nightmares and fears have passed, as I thought. But I was so wrong. Have you ever faced fears from childhood and adulthood? Then you will understand me for sure. Once, in biology class, the teacher assigned us a scientific project on the topic, the creatures that surround us. We randomly pulled out pieces of paper from a cap with the name of a partner and the animal to study for a month. The failure started from the beginning. I was paired with Michael. He and his friends have been bullying me since I was a child. He didn't like it either, so we asked the teacher to change our partners. But she told us not to act like children and pull out a piece of paper with an animal on it. And here, I was unlucky too. Worms. For what? There is nothing worse than these disgusting creatures. Although we were lucky, because my mother was studying them. She was happy to help us and even allowed us to come into her lab. That meant that we would definitely pass the school project perfectly. In the lab, I immediately remembered a nightmare that I'd had as a child. I didn't even want to look at the worms, much less touch them. But I didn't want Michael to think that I was a coward, because then he would have another reason to tease me. So I continued to study them. Surprisingly, he also worked hard and even became friends with my mother. And he didn't bully me without his friends. Once, when my mother was cutting up worms to explain their structure to us, I felt sick. I thought I was going to throw up. I didn't show it and decided it was because of the unpleasant sight. So, when they went to lunch, I stayed to continue working, hoping that I would feel better. And I didn't want to worry my mother. But it didn't get any better. My head was very dizzy. There was a lump in my throat, and then everything went dark. When I woke up, I saw my mother and Michael, who were both looking worried, trying to revive me with ammonia. Turning my head, I noticed a broken jar from which hundreds of worms were crawling at me. I think I hit it when I fell unconscious. Startled and shocked, I jumped up and clutched Michael with tears in my eyes. I was scared and disgusted. He began to reassure me. Don't worry, I'm around. You'll be fine. I was surprised at how kind and caring he could be. My mother took me to the doctor. He said that I probably fainted because of the stress that I experienced because of the phobia, and prescribed me sedatives. That moment brought Michael and me closer. Children's resentment was gone. We began to communicate more, went to lunch together, and discussed common topics. He turned out to be an interesting person and tried to protect me from working with worms, taking all the dirty work for himself. And everything would be fine, but there was one problem. I started having my childhood nightmares again, and I increasingly began to experience unbearable headaches. I decided it was a side effect of the sedatives I'd started taking in double doses in the hope of getting rid of the nightmare. One day at lunch, Michael invited me to an amusement park for the weekend. He said that he wanted to thank me for my help with the project. I agreed with pleasure. After all these worms and nightmares, I just wanted to rest and relax. I wondered if this could be considered a date. Write what you think in the comments. And so, the weekend came. He met me at the house and we went. I will never forget this day. We had fun, went on rides, walked in the park, and talked about everything. That was the day I realized I liked Michael, and he seemed to feel the same way about me. At the end of the day, he decided to walk me home. All the way, we were uncomfortably silent because we did not notice that we began to hold hands. When we reached the house, he turned me to him and wanted to kiss me, and I closed my eyes. Then someone called out to him. They were his friends. They started asking what he was doing here with me and if he was going to kiss me. I turned to Michael, thinking that he would stand up for me, but he began to justify himself, saying that he would never kiss someone like me, and he accidentally met me and decided to remind me not to forget to add his name to the school project, because he would not do this. I was in shock. How so? Maybe our entire friendship was a long-term plan to break my heart? I slapped him and ran home with tears in my eyes. I was broken and depressed, so I decided to go to bed. I had a nightmare all night. When I woke up, I felt a strange sensation on my body. I looked at my stomach and saw worms. Hundreds, no, thousands. They crawled on top of me and were everywhere. I couldn't believe my eyes. Terrified, I jumped up and turned on the light. They were gone. I was scared. I couldn't understand what was happening to me. Was I going mad? Or maybe the worms were in me from the day I had fainted. After all, the nightmares started then, and the headaches got worse, and the pills didn't help. I decided not to tell anyone. I didn't want to worry my mother, and the school project was almost due. So, come what may. I didn't speak to Michael again, called and apologized, but I told him that he was still a jerk, and if he told his friends that he would not be involved in the project, then let him not be involved in it. I would finish it myself. We would pass it together, and then let him do what he wanted. The rest of the time, I had nightmares and woke up at night to see worms on me. It bothered me and drove me crazy, but I decided to wait until the project was completed first. The day of project completion arrived. Michael and I stood in front of the class and talked about our work. My head suddenly ached. I decided to ignore it and pass the project to the end. But then, I felt a painfully familiar feeling. I looked down at my hands in horror and saw hundreds of worms crawling over them and my body. But it only happened at night. Maybe I was still sleeping, and this was all one big nightmare? I started to panic. I tried to get them off my body. Michael excitedly grabbed me and asked what was wrong. When he heard about the worms on me, he said he couldn't see anything. But how? His friends started laughing at me and calling me crazy. And then he yelled at them, told them to shut up. Don't make fun of the girl I love. I didn't expect this from him. He stood up for me and confessed his love. But what a bad time it was. The pain became unbearable and I felt like I was fainting. I woke up in the hospital. I had an emergency checkup and found a tumor in my brain. The operation was required immediately, as my condition was getting worse. After the operation, I came to myself in the ward, in hospital clothes and with my head bandaged. The doctor examined me and asked me how I was feeling, and then told me that all my hallucinations and headaches were caused by a tumor. My mother scolded me for not telling her anything, but she was glad that I was okay. Michael and I discussed everything. He promised me to stop communicating with his friends, and I promised that I would no longer hide anything from him. After the operation, the hallucinations disappeared. However, the headaches will stay with me for a while. I was discharged, but I'm supposed to be treated until I fully recover. I don't think I'm afraid of worms anymore. I realized that I was too focused on fear because I didn't even notice the disease that could have taken my life. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let go of your fears.
I didn't see anything because they blindfolded me right away. And now I had to sink into a pool full of insects. My biggest fear. I would definitely have a panic attack again. My heart was pounding, my legs were weak, but my classmates were holding my hands. God, was this really happening to me? I could feel the insect bodies crunching beneath me, and I could feel the maggots crushing under me, gritting my teeth. I tried hard not to scream, but when I felt the slimy worms touch me, I couldn't stand it. My head was spinning. My chest was tight, and I couldn't even move in fear. I was dying. And I just wanted to finally find friends. A couple of weeks ago, I transferred to a new school, and that happened because, to be honest, it's still hard for me to think about it. My friend Tracy died in a car accident. She was the only one I talked to. After her funeral, something strange started happening to me. Severe panic attacks. Sometimes I could faint out of the blue. I was literally going crazy with loneliness. I couldn't admit it to my parents. A long time ago, I had already asked them for help, but they reacted very sharply, and now they would put me in an asylum right away. I urgently needed to find some company to distract myself. I couldn't bear to be without Tracy, but they didn't want to accept me in the new class. One of the coolest companies was with Sam at the head, my classmate. Sam and his friends seemed very friendly, constantly having fun and going to joint parties. More than anything in the world, I would like to be among them right now. But when I tried to make friends with them, they just made fun of me. Sam said there was no way I'd fit in with them. He gave me a quizzical look. He was from a rich family, wore branded clothes, and clearly despised those who were poorer. And my family had never been well off. Despite this, I did not give up trying to make friends with Sam's company. I would treat them with something, then I would tell them the answers to the test. But in vain, I was almost desperate to find friends. Once, in biology class, we were studying insects. I panicked just from one picture. It became harder to breathe. I even felt dizzy. I'd been afraid of insects since childhood, but after Tracy was gone, it turned into some kind of phobia, and even the teacher paid attention to me. He asked me if I was alright. I replied in a choked voice that I just didn't like insects. I wished the lesson was over. I barely made it to the end, and then I ran out into the street. There wasn't enough air. Catching my breath, I was about to go back to class when Sam came up to me. I froze. What did he want from me? Make fun of me again? But Sam suddenly smiled amicably and said that he had been watching me for a long time and had decided that I would be accepted into the company. I couldn't believe what he was saying. What? Really? Sam continued, but first you need to pass the initiation. I looked at him in dismay. What kind of initiation was this? He grinned and patted me on the shoulder. Nothing complicated. All you have to do is go down into the pool. Well, it was easy. I chuckled. I definitely know how to swim. But Sam's eyes flashed angrily into a pool filled with insects. I froze in horror, and Sam kept talking. They could only be friends with me if I could overcome my fear. And he just had a swimming pool at home. He would organize everything. Oh, what? The shock left me speechless. Yes, I really needed to get into the company, but to go down to the insects, I almost threw up at the very thought. A chill ran down my spine. No way. This was too much. I told Sam I wasn't going to be a part of this, and I turned around. No matter how difficult it was for me to be alone, I would never agree to go down to the insects. But the very next day at school, I regretted my decision. As soon as I walked into the classroom, everyone started calling me a coward, pointing and laughing. I think I was having another attack. Sam turned everyone against me. I tried to ignore it, but my classmates wouldn't leave me alone. They bullied me. They framed me during tests and locked me in the class. It only made me feel worse. My hands were shaking almost constantly now, and my heart was pounding. I wish Tracy was here again. The loneliness made me want to climb the wall. I was trapped and cried all night. And in the morning, I looked terribly tired. No, that was enough. It couldn't go on like this. Loneliness and these damn panic attacks were much worse than fear. If I didn't communicate with anyone, I would just go crazy. This was my last chance to get into the company. So when I arrived at the school, I went straight to Sam and told him that I was willing to take his initiation. He exchanged glances with his friends and grinned. "Well, I'll see you at my house tomorrow night," he said. I was restless for a whole day. I was very scared. I was shaking most of the day, and no matter how much I tried to push my thoughts away, I could see a swimming pool filled with insects. Vile, slimy, buzzing. What if I got really bad there? No. I had to do this for the company, and then everything would be fine. I would never be alone again. The next day, I went to Sam's house in advance. Everything clenched inside me from fear and terror. Was I going to have to stand in a pool with insects soon? Maybe. Hell with it. I wanted to run away and forget everything like a bad dream, but I forced myself to go inside. Sam met me on the doorstep with his friends. He was smiling and holding a rack in his hand. I frowned. What was that for? But he only waved his hand. This was part of the initiation. He immediately blindfolded me. I swallowed. Maybe it was ever easier that way. I wouldn't see those nasty wiggling bugs. Hell, the very thought of them made me sick. Sam and one of his friends took my hands and led me to the pool. I could feel my heart beating fast, my legs refusing to move. But I had no choice. This was the only way to make friends. I had to get over my fear. Sam helped me down into the pool. As soon as I felt the insects crunch beneath me, the maggots burst and a lump rose in my throat. No, I couldn't. Something slimy crawled up my leg and I got dizzy. That was enough. Get me out of here. The last thing I heard was Sam shouting something. My legs buckled. I think I was losing consciousness. When I came to, I immediately saw Sam and the guys from his company. They were all leaning over me, each trying to help me. Someone was splashing water on my face. Someone was holding my head. But Sam was the most worried. He was terribly pale. When he saw that I came to, he let out a sigh of relief and squeezed my hand. He said he was very glad I was okay. I was furious. You're the one who made me go down to the insects. Damn it. You knew I was scared to death of them. If it wasn't for you, I'd be fine. But Sam shook his head. There were no insects, he said. See for yourself. What? What's he talking about? I raised myself up on my elbows and saw the ill-fated pool, and I couldn't believe my eyes. The pool was filled to the brim with grapes and marmalade worms. So I thought they were the nasty maggots? And the bugs that crunched under my feet were just plain popcorn. So this was all just my imagination? The mixed emotions made me cry. I fainted because of the marmalade. It was ridiculous. I was overwhelmed with resentment. Sobbing, I blurted out, "You've arranged this to make fun of me." But Sam shook his head again. It turned out that he only wanted to help me overcome my fear. He used to have the same phobia. He fainted even from the sight of a worm, but Sam managed to overcome it. and now he just wanted to help me not to be afraid to. But he didn't expect that I would react so sharply. He was very worried about me. Sam smiled faintly and tried to apologize. He said I was definitely accepted into the company now, and no more bugs. A couple of days ago, I wanted to hear it, but I didn't feel anything right now, only anger and resentment. I knew how wrong I'd been about Sam and his company, and for the sake of these idiots, I was ready to swim with bugs. I couldn't believe it. Was I really that stupid? I stood up abruptly, waving away the help. Sam stared at me in surprise. I don't need such friends. I turned and headed for the exit. Sam was taken aback for a second, and then he started to catch up with me and mumble some apologies. But I was adamant. When I finally left the house, I breathed a sigh of relief. Did I really think these guys could replace Tracy for me? It made me laugh. I was just approaching my house when I suddenly felt something on my hand. I lowered my gaze. I froze for a second. There was a big spider on my arm. Probably it fell on me from a tree while I was walking. I swallowed, and suddenly I realized that I wasn't afraid of it. This stupid initiation really helped me get rid of my phobia and eternal anxiety. I calmly shook off the spider and headed home, of course. This did not justify Sam and his friends, but now I finally felt strong. I understood that I could handle all the difficulties on my own, and I knew that Tracy would be proud of me. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.